Lorraine Cox, who is 32 years old, is the woman who is seen walking in this video. She spent the day in a pub with friends in Exeter after the pubs and clubs in England had just recently reopened following the protracted lockdown, and she is obviously drunk. When Lorraine and one of her best friends became separated just before closing time, she chose to walk to her dad's house, which was only a short distance away. Lorraine was meant to spend the night at one of her closest friends' houses. Lorraine is being followed, although she is unaware of it. She has been being followed by this man for more than a mile, and he is going to catch up to her. If he does, what would happen is nothing short of horrifying. Shortly after this encounter, Lorraine would go missing, and 9 days later, her dismembered body would turn up in various Exeter dumps. The murderer had attempted to cover up his shocking crime in a number of ways, but thanks to the extensive network of CCTV cameras in England and the investigators' tenacious efforts, they were able to identify the perpetrator, and the chilling and sickening motive behind this heinous act came to light. This is Lorraine Cox's gruesome true crime tale. A kind-hearted and giving young woman from Devon in the UK, Lorraine Cox, she relocated to Scotland in 2020 to live with her fiancé amid the harsh shutdown, since she is known for being jovial and kind. Lorraine made the decision to return to Exeter in August 2020 after going through some challenging times and missing the comfort of her friends and family there. On August 31st, Lorraine was eager to reunite with several friends after nearly a year apart. She had been back home in Exeter for about 2 weeks. After the lockdown, bars and pubs in England reopened, so they made the decision to meet there. The afternoon was full of conversation, laughter, and drinks shared with friends who undoubtedly had many interesting tales to tell. Time seemed to fly by as the talk continued and the happiness of reconnecting took over. And then it was suddenly 1:30 a.m. and the pub was about to close. Prior to closing time, Lorraine had planned to spend the night at one of her friends' houses, but for some reason, they split up. Concerned about Lorraine traveling the 2 miles alone at night to her father's home in Beaconheath, another acquaintance graciously volunteered to order a taxi for her. Lorraine, on the other hand, said she was well and chose to proceed by walking. She said her goodbyes to her friends without realizing it would be their last time together and that they would never meet again. Through text messages, Lorraine kept in touch with her friends and family over the following few days, but they couldn't help but feel something wasn't right. When they tried to call her, she avoided picking up the phone and instead opted to reply to them through texting, which was unusual and out of character for her. They began to inquire more frequently as their worry mounted, but Lorraine grew more evasive. Then, almost out of nowhere, Lorraine updated her location on Facebook and claimed to have moved to Plymouth in a message to her closest family and friends. Her loved ones were convinced that something was really wrong as a result of this sudden announcement, which only raised their suspicions and confusion. Lorraine's dad visited her residence to make sure everything was well. When he arrived, Lorraine was nowhere to be seen, but he did see something that worried him greatly. There were still all of Lorraine's medications. She was a type 1 diabetic, and it was concerning that she hadn't brought her insulin medicine with her. On September 3, 2020, Lorraine's father went to file a missing persons report since he was now certain that foul activity was involved. The moment Lorraine returned home, the police opened an inquiry and went to question her companions. Upon discovering Lorraine had gone home at 1:30 in the morning, it didn't take them long to recognize Lorraine when they turned to the CCTV tape to try and retrace her steps. Soon after 2 in the morning, Lorraine is seen ambling down Exeter High Street, seeming unconcerned and at ease. Police, however, immediately observed a male walking by himself not far behind her. It becomes clear that he is lagging Lorraine, and he continues to do so for more than a mile. As she makes her way to her father's home in Beaconheath, Lorraine, who is still ignorant that the man is following her, strolls along nonchalantly with her hands in her pockets. The police keep a close eye on the man as he approaches Lorraine, while they continue to speculate about his motivations. At some point, Lorraine notices the man standing behind her and turns to face him. Uncertain of what they say to one another, Lorraine chooses to cross the street. She is still being followed across the street by the man, and shortly after that, it appears that they have started talking. As they appear to be walking away from where they came from, the two are seen strolling closely together, and the man even puts his arm around Lorraine's shoulder. Although it's still unclear if Lorraine is choosing to walk with him or if she's being forced, it is clear that she is shaky. The trail becomes untraceable as Lorraine and the unidentified man are seen heading along the high street before turning down a side street. The police are aware that the individual seen in the clip is essential to cracking the case, because no other cameras caught Lorraine's movements subsequently. Police started a full-scale quest to find the unidentified man in the video, and it quickly brought them to a home located above a kebab restaurant off the main drag. Shortly after Lorraine passed the shop, they saw the unidentified man leave this establishment, and he started immediately following Lorraine. When police arrived at the alleged residence, they spoke with a 22-year-old guy who claimed to be Christopher Myers. He originally denied ever seeing Lorraine, but when they had the CCTV footage in hand, they quickly detained him and charged him with kidnapping, which was later changed to murder. Police discovered dismembered body parts, including human limbs and legs, after checking the garbage in the alleyway behind his building. Later, it would be established that this belonged to Lorraine Cox. In the alley, the police would also discover Lorraine's phone, clothes, and duffel bag. In addition to her SIM card, Lorraine's bank card and driver's license were discovered in the suspect's kitchen. The suspect had a mountain of evidence against him, and when the police looked a little closer, they found that he had lied about his identification and that his name wasn't Christopher Myers. He told authorities that his real name was Azam Mangori and that he was an immigrant from Iraq after realizing that the work was over. He claimed to be a gay man who had fled to the UK because his sexual orientation would have resulted in his execution in Iraq. He submitted an application for asylum in 2018 but was turned down, so he traveled to the UK illegally and landed in the back of a truck. Azam Mangori told the police that he had run into Lorraine on the aforementioned night while strolling down Exeter's High Street. He invited her back to his house with the promise of drugs and drinks when they got to talking. The two returned to his apartment after he reported that Lorraine had enthusiastically consented. He then provided the police with a recording of him and Lorraine in the alleyway, where they looked to be having consensual sex, before claiming that he and Lorraine had consensual sex there before they arrived at the apartment. He claimed that he made the recording in order to defend himself in the event that he was later the target of allegations. Azam then told the police that once they got back to his apartment, he and Lorraine proceeded to drink and listen to music before engaging in some more intercourse. The two of them started smoking a black substance that Lorraine had pulled out of a foil bag at some point during the evening. He had no idea what the material was, but as soon as it hit him, he felt faint and nauseous, so he laid down on the bed and passed out. He claimed that after some time passed, he awoke and saw Lorraine unconscious on the floor. He also claimed that at that point, he realized she was not breathing. When Azam checked her pulse and attempted to give CPR, he reportedly panicked and started having hallucinations in which he saw spiders coming out of her lips. He grabbed a t-shirt and put it in her mouth, trying to stop the spiders from emerging because he was so terrified and perplexed. He claimed that after that, he went unconscious and prayed that it had all been a horrible dream. The next morning, Azam claimed, the harsh truth set in, and his life began to resemble a nightmare. He was overcome by shame and anxiety, which rendered him indecisive. He was compelled to call the police and confess, but he refrained out of fear of being accused of murder. After that, he experienced a bizarre mental change and became disoriented. He found it difficult to tell what was genuine from what was an illusion as the distinction between the two grew hazy. He started having terrifying hallucinations while clinging to the hope that Lorraine would suddenly awaken. He claimed that even while the body was being brutally dismembered, his mind wandered and he was unaware of what was happening. He claimed that in his thoughts, he was slicing up wet tobacco while fully oblivious to his surroundings. Although Azam Mangori's account of what happened was peculiar, authorities were able to point out its flaws quickly, and the available evidence began to refute it. Although toxicology tests revealed no evidence of drug use in Lorraine's system, Azam claimed that he and Lorraine had taken an odd substance at his apartment. He also claimed that following the murder, he had entered a state of terror, yet his behavior seemed unexpected. His movements, though, seemed extremely deliberate and composed. Azam was seen on Azam's building's CCTV tape throwing away Lorraine's possessions in the alleyway, despite his apparent calmness. In another piece of CCTV footage, we can see Azam walking through the city with a sizable rucksack as he makes his way to the location where the remaining body parts will be disposed of. Despite carrying a dead body in his bag, Azam appears to be acting fairly coolly and deliberately in this video. Azam added that he mistakenly believed he was breaking up wet tobacco while dismembering the body. However, an examination of his phone showed that he had looked up a number of amputation videos, and even looked up instructions on how to dig a grave by hand in the days preceding the murder. The courts would eventually learn that Azam even erased a tattoo that Lorraine had on her back, neatly cutting off her limbs at the joints, showing his meticulous preparation and making it more difficult to identify her body. Azam also uploaded recordings of himself smoking a hookah pipe and listening to music while Lorraine lay dead just beyond the camera's vision, which he forwarded to his buddies shortly after the murder. He was also seen buying items for disposing of her body, such as bin bags, tape, a suitcase, and an air purifier, in stores in the days after the murder. This did not appear to be the behavior of a man experiencing an unusual mental condition. Azam Mangori proceeded to give his version of events as the trial went on, pleading not guilty to murder but confessing to improperly disposing of Lorraine's body. The state, on the other hand, made a strong argument and painted a different and unsettling picture of what happened that night. The prosecution presented a gruesome account of Azam Mangori as a cold-blooded murderer during the trial. They disclosed that on August 31st, Azam had made contact with an escort service before becoming lost in the city's center, where he came across Lorraine, who was obviously inebriated and exposed. Lorraine agreed to accompany him home, although it was obvious that she was having problems walking. The prosecution claimed that Azam's horrific murder fantasies were his underlying motivation. They thought he killed her, probably by choking or smothering her with her own t-shirt, then callously dismembered her body and meticulously thought out where to dispose of the pieces. Azam Mangori was ultimately convicted of murder and given a minimum sentence of 20 years in jail before being eligible for parole. The judge criticized Azam's behavior throughout the sentencing, noting that he had taken the life of a smart, lively young woman who had her entire life ahead of her.